Hey everyone, I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight on this Fat Tuesday. Happy Mardi Gras. And Mardi Gras, come on, it's the time for masquerading and partying before Lent. And tonight, we're going to unmask the motives of some of those who are trying to take down President Trump. Jim Jordan, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, is here on the revolt from within. And we're going to take you to New Orleans for an insider view of a real carnival and my ride with the crew of Orpheus. That's why I have no voice. Plus, a former FEC commissioner says AOC could face jail time for campaign finance violations. I thought she was all about transparency. And we have some alarming new numbers about the crisis at our border, and it's an emergency as the left wants us to focus on the plight just of illegals. Okay, well, we're going to separate fact from fiction. But first, the resistance unmasked. That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, the Democratic resistance is running at full tilt, making threats and launching investigations of 81 people and enterprises associated, and some of them not even associated, with President Trump. Now, naturally, the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Democrat Jerry Nadler, is out bloviating for the president's impeachment.
Do you think the president obstructed justice?
Yes, I do. It's very clear that the president obstructed justice. It's very clear. 1,100 times he referred to the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. He tried to protect Flynn from being investigated by the FBI. He fired Comey in order to stop the Russian thing, as he told NBC News.
Okay, hold on a second. So now giving one's opinion qualifies as obstruction of justice. Now, I don't know what federal criminal law Nadler studied, but my legal background says that is just ludicrous. Now, contrary to what Nadler and company claim, none of this is about exercising their constitutional right to oversight of the executive branch. I want you to understand that. It's not about what they say it's about. So, document requests? Who needs documents? Come on, why hear testimony? They've already made up their minds. Mueller, by the way, has spent 2 years investigating Russia's possible collusion in the 2016 election, and it looks like he's come up with nothing. He's issued indictments, called witnesses before the grand jury. He's interviewed more than 40 people. He's reviewed over 1 million documents. And he's even referred separate matters to the Southern District of New York. And remember the Democrats' glowing words about Mueller when he was appointed?
This is an absolutely brilliant choice. There is no more respected figure in American law enforcement than Bob Mueller.
I think the best thing that happened, Chris, was to have something like Mueller to come in.
He's a pro. He's going to follow the facts where they lead.
Okay, how odd then? Then why does Nadler not trust him and his prosecutors, who've already, by the way, I just found this out, spent $25 million of the taxpayer money on this investigation? Why did they trust him then to get to the bottom of things? He was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Even Ty Cobb says so now. Now, the way I see Nadler, the way I see it, Nadler's going to almost entirely re-till the ground that Mueller has already passed over. But why is Nadler doing this? Getting back to our theme of unmasking. For the sole purpose of creating a political spectacle and to continue it right up until the last vote is counted in 2020. Remember, President Nixon was threatened with impeachment for obstruction of justice. President Clinton was impeached for obstruction of justice. So why is Nadler not moving forward with articles of impeachment against President Trump immediately?
Impeachment is a long way down the road. We don't have the facts yet, but we're going to initiate proper investigation. We do not now have the evidence all sorted out and everything to do an impeachment. Before you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen.
Actually, that's not in the Constitution either, but whatever, that's the Constitution. But a separate question, isn't that what Nadler has been trying to do with his recent impeachment media tour? He's been trying to convince the public that there are 1,000 reasons to impeach the president, even if he cannot prove a single one. Meanwhile, the House Ways and Means Committee Chair, Richard Neal, is requesting the president's tax returns from the IRS. That's a shock. A Pelosi spokesman says they will take all necessary steps including litigation, if necessary, to obtain them. What does that have to do with collusion? Well, anyway, all of this sends a thrill up the leg of the media resistance, of course. Yesterday, the New York Times editorial page tantalized its readers by predicting a long and painful ordeal for the president and those close to him. Quote, political investigations tend to be marathons rather than sprints. With his investigation, Mr. Nadler is looking to build a case for impeachment so compelling it will have enough bipartisan support to survive the Republican-controlled Senate. Barring that, his investigation will serve to keep the heat on Mr. Trump and perhaps keep the Democratic base at least somewhat placated as the next election approaches. Aha! Well, at least they admit that this is an entirely politically motivated attack meant to soften up the president for 2020 and dangle some red meat on a hook for their base. Now, note the wishful thinking. I love that line in the editorial. Thinking of bipartisan support for impeachment. Well, can you count that out completely? Well, at a time when Republicans should be bolstering the president's agenda, on key issues especially, I see on one at least they're undermining him. And leadership can't seem to hold it together.
I was hoping the president would not take the national emergency route. Once he decided to do that, I said I would support it, but I was hoping he wouldn't take that particular path.
Well, that's a really bold statement. I was supporting it, but I hoping he wouldn't take it, meaning he's not going to insist that his members put the real pressure, as he could do, on his members to actually push it. You know, look, with all due respect, it is partly Mitch McConnell's fault that the president had to declare a national emergency at all. He and Paul Ryan promised the president when he signed that ridiculous omnibus spending bill last year that they would get him the funding he needed for the wall before last year ended, no matter what happened in the election. Well, what happened? Well, we predicted on this show. They didn't do it. McConnell has done a masterful job of getting judges through the Senate, phenomenal on the court, Supreme Court stuff, all of that. And he can't control how Collins, Murkowski, people like Rand Paul vote, but he basically signaled to them that their vote against the president on this issue of the national emergency was okay. My friends, Congress specifically delegated to the president the authority to declare national emergencies. They did it long ago in sections 201 and 301 of the National Emergencies Act. If you're a law geek, it's 50 U.S.C. 1601. He cited this in his official declaration. The president did as is required. And the president has already invoked his national emergency powers on 3 occasions, adding to the 28 earlier national emergency measures that remain in effect today. This is an important point. Congress has never before moved to end a president's emergency declaration. Until now. Now, even the New York Times front page today painted a grim picture of what's happening at the border. Here's a quote. A feverish teenager with a vile-smelling wound on his foot, a man with a head injury and bright red eyes, children with fevers, coughs, and colds. And the Customs and Border Patrol numbers of family units crossing the border was breathtaking.
We have apprehended and encountered more families in just 5 months and 5 days than last year's record total. Now 70% of all crossings are from these countries, and a full 62% of all crossings and encounters are vulnerable families and children.
We've had almost 2,400 fraudulent claims of families.
Now, more on the dire situation of the border is going to be coming up later in the show. You do not want to miss it. It goes way beyond that. And there's a lot more in that New York Times piece we're going to get into. And we will be naming names and unmasking the motives of those on the left and some on the right who are working to stop stronger enforcement on our southern border, which includes a physical barrier. The president must continue to stand firm on this issue and forge ahead against the Chamber of Commerce Republicans who want an endless flow of cheap labor, and the open borders Democrats who think they have an endless supply of new voters. And as for the Democratic impeach squad, keep unmasking their real motives, you bet. If they cared about the Constitution and the rule of law, they wouldn't have let the border get this out of control in the first place. And they would have demanded that Hillary Clinton and her protectorate pay for their wrongdoing. That's law and order, don't you think? This is a political war. All of this that you're seeing around you. And it's meant to undo the president's successes and block his agenda for the next 2 years. That's all it's about. This isn't just harassment of President Trump. He said that today. It's harassment of the millions of Americans who voted for his agenda, and it's an abuse of the entire democratic process that the Democrats claim to care so much about. And that's the angle. All right, joining me now with reaction, Congressman Jim Jordan, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, let's start on the border issue, then we're going to get back to what else is cooking. But, I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but this is a national travesty. And the Democrats will say, oh, it's not bad at all on the border. It's you know, interceptions of people are down. There are fewer people crossing. What's the real truth?
You just heard from the agents on the border talking about how bad it is. Even the New York Times talk about the 70-some thousand just this month alone crossing the border. So I always say, if what are we on, the 5th caravan? What do we need, a 6th caravan, 7th caravan, an endless caravan before we say it's an emergency? The president is right. And some of the Republicans who are opposing the president, as you said in your opening, in your Ingraham angle, some of those are the same ones who last year during the Congress didn't want to get it done when we had the majority in both the House and the Senate. So this is something that's going to, looks like the Senate's going to vote to overrule the president's order, but when the president vetoes it and it comes back for a veto, we'll be able to sustain his veto.
Mitch McConnell could have pushed this. He could have demanded his
we should have done
members.
Omnibus. We should have done it last Congress.
But they promised the president you're going to get your wall funding.
Yeah,
just get us through this period. Isn't that always a little carrot you dangle in front of someone?
Right. We'll get it later. There's always a million reasons why you shouldn't do what you said you would do. Most importantly, what the voters elected you to do. But this president is keeping his word and doing what he said, and that's why the American people like him. And that's why this town doesn't like him.
Your advice to him in this moment, we're going to get into the impeachment squad. People think, oh, we got him. The walls are closing around him. We got these subpoenas issued. Ivanka, Jared, you know, from weird Russians I've never heard of. Like all these, they're all named, and the 81 people. What should the president do as this is swirling around?
Just keep doing his job. I was back home Friday night. We had a Lincoln Day dinner I spoke at, and the crowd was huge, and they were so enthusiastic for the president fighting for what he told the American people to do. You know what's interesting, too, about these 81 letters that Mr. Nadler sent? What's interesting is who he didn't send them to. He didn't send all these people, 81 different entities, over 60 different people, but he didn't send it to the two most important, Glenn Simpson and Christopher Steele. Glenn Simpson, who was paid by the Clintons to put the dossier together, and who did he do? He hired Christopher Steele, a foreigner, to write the dossier that was the basis of all.
That's the list of all the people, by the way.
All those people, but not the two that count the most. And so, look, they started their impeachment effort last Wednesday. They started their impeachment last Wednesday with Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen, their first announced witness of the 116th Congress, a guy who's going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress, came in last Wednesday and did what?
That's their ace in the hole.
Came in last Wednesday and did what? Lied 6 times under oath. And that's why we sent a criminal referral letter to the Attorney General.
Well, I mean, Bill Barr has got to act on this. I'm sorry, Bill Barr could act on this. Could Bill Barr reopen the investigation into Mrs. Clinton?
He could.
Should he?
What he should do is tell us what John Huber's doing, what Michael Horowitz is doing, what the FISA abuse that they're supposed to be looking into, and this whole idea that you had the top people at the FBI, Comey, McCabe, Baker, Strzok, Page, all these people who launched and ran the Clinton investigation and then launched and ran the Trump-Russia investigations, they've all been fired or left the FBI. 2 are under investigation. That's where we need to look.
But there's plenty of collusion here.
Yeah,
but right, but what about Tony Podesta? Why does he seem to be able to get away with so much activity with Russia?
Crazy. We've talked about this before, and you've been great on this double standard. One set of rules for us regular folk, a different set of...
Well, we have a new Attorney General in place who could take a sober, dispassionate look. Yeah. No one's looking to put scalps on the wall. But if this is what we're going to be dealing with, like on the other side, at least people should have a clear sense of what happened before this, correct?
Right. Go back and look at this fundamental fact. The Clinton campaign paid the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired Glenn Simpson, who then went and hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, who talked to a couple Russians, never went to Russia, put together this fake document called the dossier that the FBI used. Comey, McCabe, and all these people used, Strzok and Page used, to go to a secret court to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. And that's what launched it all. And now we got 81 letters going to people, but none of them are going to the guys that count the most, Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson.
I think everyone who signed those FISA warrants, those applications to the court, not revealing that it was Hillary Clinton who paid for them, that still sticks in my craw.
Here's the other thing we have. We got competing testimony. We got McCabe saying one thing, Comey saying something else, Strzok saying one thing. This is why we need to look at this issue. And
nobody pays, though. This is what drives people crazy.
It does.
We have a new attorney general who is a consummate professional.
We're going to talk to him about these things.
And you are in the process of talking to him about all of this?
We are.
I know we'll say, oh, that's looking backward. We want to look for. No, this is the rule of law.
The rule of law. Equal treatment under the law, most importantly.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. So Jerry Nadler did reveal something else during his media tour, that his impeachment investigation is basically just a popularity contest between the Democrats and Trump. You don't believe me? Watch what he says next about the American public.
If you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen. You have to persuade enough of the opposition party voters or the Trump voters that you're not just trying to.
It's a very high bar.
Yeah, it is a very high bar. That you're not just trying to steal the last election, to reverse the results of the last election. We may or may not get there, but what we have to do is protect the rule of law.
Joining me now is Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary for Bush 43 and a Fox News contributor. Also with me, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. All right, Ari, let's start with you. Why does Nadler's plan revolve around, quote, persuading the American people? That sounds a lot like 2020 election cycle. It's like persuading the American. Well, he says he obstructed justice basically 1,100 times, a breath earlier. So let's get the hearings underway. Let's get the vote underway. Forget the hearings. You don't need the hearings.
If you don't have the facts and you don't have the events, you just have a PR campaign. And that's basically what the Democrats are launching. All of them. And look, it's not just Jerry Nadler. You have David Cicilline on the Judiciary Committee who said the president went on a crime spree before he was elected. You have the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Elijah Cummings, who said that at the Cohen hearing, there was proof that the president committed a crime. The problem the Democrats have is you can't use words like that, Laura, crime spree, crime, obstruction, without unleashing impeachment that you cannot control. And that's where this is heading in the Democratic-controlled House.
Pam, CNN's Jeffrey Toobin, who I know you guys are good buds, he was talking about how Obama didn't have to deal with any of this because, let's watch.
People in Barack Obama's White House, they didn't have to hire lawyers because there were no scandals. I don't think it's just the Times. I think it's the presidency. Well, this is a president who is under investigation for good reason.
Here's a list of some of the scandals, Pam. Let's put them up on the screen. Fast and Furious, of course, holder of guns across the border. Benghazi, IRS targeting, Clinton private email server, just to name a few. We had the green energy blow up with Solyndra, etc. So where are we here?
Well, it's utterly ridiculous, Laura. We know even in criminal court you have double jeopardy when someone is charged with a crime. So here we have Robert Mueller. We know the report's about to come out. It's going to exonerate the president. And now they're going to go after him again. And all they're trying to do, they're trying to drag the president and his family through the mud. While, look at Jared Kushner. Look what he's done. The STEP Act. Democrats should embrace that. They should embrace. Jared fought to get the STEP Act passed. It's amazing prison reform. Everything Ivanka's done for women's empowerment. Everything all the family members have done. Look at the GDP. Look at women's unemployment. Look at minority unemployment.
I don't care about that. Pam, you're acting like they care about that. This is brutal political warfare.
It is.
They want to take him out on his knees. And it's not enough to say they're harassing me. This has got to be a forward campaign of historic speeches where he is doubling down on success. I think he has to double down on the border, do asylum reform, all this stuff, and say, okay, you guys, I'm serious about making this country even greater than it already is.
I agree.
And all you want to do is bring, like, Jerome Corsi up to testify on Capitol Hill. I mean, my God.
While the president's out there saving the world, and he is. And as far as the border, the hypocrisy there.
Oh, no.
You know, look at the guns. The guns. So Democrats want to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, yet they want them to flow across our border into the hands of gang members and drug dealers. It's unbelievable. They ignore that.
No. Ari, you've seen this before. We witnessed what impeachment did to the country before. I was just getting going on TV when this was happening. I just started a show on another network the day the impeachment report dropped. And I think Republicans thought, we have them this time. How did that all work out for the Republicans back then?
It boomeranged. Republicans lost 5 seats in the House of Representatives in '98 right after impeaching Bill Clinton because the country wasn't there. And the country's not there for this now. Look, Laura, the first campaign I ever worked on, I was 21 years old, 1982, and I was told the incumbent Democrat did cocaine. I said, how do you know that? And they said, well, we don't really know, but that's what we heard. And that's when I realized in politics there's a tendency to criminalize, delegitimize whoever your opponent is, and I've always tried to resist it in politics. It's wrong when it was done to George Bush. It's wrong when it's done to Donald Trump. And the day that Donald Trump was elected, the Democrats went to overdrive trying to delegitimize him, and they've never stopped. They boycotted his inaugural. They had the phony dossier that was immediately leaked to the press. They unmasked Michael Flynn. They leaked his phone calls to foreign leaders. They tried to turn around the results in the Electoral College.
Relentless.
They have never stopped the delegitimization campaign, and that's what the last 2 years of collusion have been about. And that's what the next 2 years will be about as the Democrats pursue impeachment.
I got about 15 seconds. Wrap it up for us.
And Laura, it's the president is out there doing his job in a great, great way. And the Democrats do not care about our country if they're not going to support all the positive things that are going on and be obstructionists. That's an understatement.
They are literally saying, downplaying the economy, one of the greatest ever, downplaying the problem at the border, a serious emergency at our border right now.
Drug addiction.
Even with the humanitarian crisis that they claim to care about. Guys, we're going to continue on this. We have a lot more to get to. Up next, the Border Patrol today revealed shocking new numbers. You will not, it's worse than I ever could have imagined. But the liberals aren't concerned about it at all. Huh. Could Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez be going to jail? All these topics coming up.
The rising volumes of people illegally crossing our southwest border or arriving at our ports of entry without documents. This increased flow presents, currently at our highest levels in over a decade, both a border security and a humanitarian crisis. Regardless of anyone's preferred policy outcome, the status quo is unacceptable.
Sobering new statistics today from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In this fiscal year so far, there has been more than a 300% increase in the number of family units, or people posing as family units, apprehended compared to the same time last year. And in total, CBP has arrested more than 268,000 illegals at our southwest border just in the last 5 months. Put that in perspective. That's almost the population of Durham, North Carolina, which is the 77th most populous city in America. Yet the Democrats want to block President Trump's national emergency declaration because, you know, there's no crisis at the border.
Well, this is a manufactured crisis.
I think there's a problem, not a crisis.
A wall is a colossal waste of money for a crisis that doesn't exist.
This is really a manufactured crisis on many levels, manufactured by the Trump administration.
Well, it's not manufactured unless you have open borders, and yeah, they can just come right in. Even the liberal New York Times is more concerned about the plight of the illegals than their threat to our safety. Just look at the headline on the front page today. Border Patrol facilities put detainees with medical conditions at risk. Well, why is the left attacking our border agents? They're the ones putting their lives on the line every day trying to protect us, the American people. Joining me now, Howie Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz, Sundays right here on FNC, and Tim Ballard, a former DHS special agent and founder of Operation Underground Railroad, which rescues victims from human smuggling. Great to have both of you on. Howie, why does the New York Times, after laying out, I want to read part of this, they lay out this harrowing story about the border, and then they claim in editorials it doesn't exist. This is part of what they wrote. Let's start with today. An average of 2,200 migrants a day are now crossing the 1,900-mile border with Mexico, many after grueling journeys that leave them injured, sick, or badly dehydrated. Yet most of the nation's Customs and Border Protection facilities along the border lack sufficient accommodations, staffing, or procedures to thoroughly assess health needs or to provide more than basic emergency care. And then March 5th, the New York Times editorial board says that national emergency doesn't exist, saying the National Emergencies Act doesn't define what an emergency is, a loophole Trump took advantage of. Contrary to all the evidence, there's basically not a crisis at the border.
Well, Laura, I think the New York Times news story is a legitimate journalistic look at a humanitarian crisis, which, by the way, quotes Kirsten Nielsen as saying we're doing everything we can, but we don't have the resources, which says that many of the migrants arrived, they already have chronic diseases, or they were...
Why is that the American taxpayers' fault?
Well, it is a situation...
Or responsibility. It's horrible, and it's awful, and parents who do this, I understand why they're doing it, but they're putting their children at risk, and themselves are, we're going to talk to Tim about, at risk of being trafficked themselves, correct?
Fair enough. It underscores how much of the media are totally focused on this side of the story. This is their emergency, not the broader emergency the President Trump...
Not the American people, but other people.
And it enables them, many of them, to blame every bad thing that happens to migrants on the Trump administration.
Right, but even, and Tim, I'm trying to get at this, they lay out what is an emergency situation. Now, they can blame Trump for it and say it's all Trump's fault that we don't have five-star facilities at our border, hotels, full concierge medical care, English language lessons. I mean, we do have a lot of good stuff at helping people. But they lay this out. So in their description, it is an emergency. They just want us to throw more money at it.
Look, I look at this through the eyes of kids. That's my job. I spent 12 years on that border, by the way, as an undercover operator, special agent, looking for children who are being trafficked into the United States to be sold to our American pedophiles. This is an emergency to these children. They're coming in here, they're being dragged by... There's a 300% increase in adults bringing children who aren't their kids.
Yeah.
So these kids are vulnerable to being trafficked. 93% of these kids that we're recovering are outside the port of entry. Okay, so where are they going? A lot of them are being used as pawns because we have this strange policy that Congress passed that says bring a kid and you can claim
right, which is again the Democrats and Republicans both. I blame both from the angle. They are both responsible, both parties, for not addressing this asylum issue.
Right.
That as long as you come in with someone you say is related to you, you cannot be sent home. You're not. Basically, children are resettled here, even if they're temporarily, for a short period of time now separated. But they are both settled here together, unless you can somehow figure out they're not related. Where is our Congress?
No,
and Trump's the problem?
Yeah, we're incentivizing smugglers. But think of this. Think like a criminal, right? You bring a kid across, and if you're caught, you can say, asylum, I get to stay here. But we know that they're not doing that, all of them. They're taking these kids and they're selling them into our sex markets here in the United States. And so we have to control the movements. A wall, a barrier controls the movements so we can identify who's coming in and save these kids. Through the eyes of the kids, I see this. Save the kids.
Yeah, there's the children aspect, the suffering aspect, the health aspect. And a lot of people watching tonight are like, look, I say this, we have two blocks from where we are broadcasting. Every night we drive home, and there are 7-8 people on the street. It's freezing out tonight.
Yeah.
And these appear to be American citizens, and they're on the street 500 yards from the nation's capital. And and it's sad, it's horrible, but a lot of Americans watching tonight go, why are we putting all of our resources on helping people who need to be able to thrive in their own countries?
The part of the border...
As much as it's sad 2 blocks from here.
Yeah.
Sad what's happening with Tim. Tim's documented all of this.
We see it on North Capitol Street. The part of the border situation that the media minimize is the illegal immigrants who get through and sometimes cause, as we well know, problems for American families. But at the same time, you said Democrats are trying to block President Trump's emergency declaration. Well, there now appears to be enough Republican defections in the Senate that's going to go against the president. It'd still be vetoed, I understand.
It doesn't surprise me one bit. Why does it not surprise me? Like, we're going beyond the headlines here. You dig into beyond the headlines every day. And Howie, you do such a great job.
Thank you.
This is about what has always happened with these two parties. Republicans love to have the cheap labor flowing in for businesses because they hate this. The worst thing for American businesses is when wages start growing up. Sorry, but they want to keep a downward pressure on wages. The more people coming in, the lower the wages can be in certain sectors. And that Democrats, and I want to play this for Nancy Pelosi, this is Nancy Pelosi, I believe today, in an interview, about what kind of tells what the Democrats' motives are. Let's watch.
These newcomers make America more American. And we want them, when they come here, to be fully part of our system. And that means not suppressing the vote of our newcomers to America.
She's talking about legal immigrants.
Right.
We want everyone to be able to vote.
Right.
But this is going way forward. I mean, we have Democrats pushing to legalize illegal immigrants to vote even if they're not citizens, that they should be able to vote. That is a new movement building slowly in localities and cities. That's what this is about. Votes for Democrats, cheap workers for Republicans. And meanwhile, kids are being hurt, as Tim has documented, and the American people are just, okay, how much more money do I have to spend?
The challenge for the press is to
billions.
The challenge for the press is to focus on all sides of this crisis and not be swept away by one faction or another's political.
I agree, but why do they not do front page articles in the New York Times, Howard? Not that you speak with them. More about what's happened with illegal immigrant crime in the United States. That they commit less crime than native-born people. Well. That's the same old trope. It doesn't feel like less crime when you don't have a husband to go home to, or you don't have a brother or a daughter, or someone's been trafficked. Why don't are you getting enough help from Capitol Hill on what you're doing? I mean, you get some help, but either party helping?
We are getting help from I'll say from the Utah delegation. They've come strong. Senator Hatch, Senator Lee, Congressman Curtis. We just got some bills passed that we brought to them. They passed the bills. President signed them into law in January. Bills that will help us work internationally to stop. It's got to be a comprehensive approach because these kids are trafficked internationally. Almost 800,000 a year.
What's a typical man, supposedly man, right? A typical man, is there an age that engages in this disgusting, despicable criminal
it's the hardest thing because there is no profile.
There is no profile.
It's scary. They're professionals, they're educators, they're everybody. We've arrested law enforcement officers, and you can't detect. It's very difficult. That's why we have to be proactive as a nation to find these kids.
But we have a 300% increase of adults with people they say are related to them.
And they're not.
How do we track that down? We're doing DNA tests? Of course we're not. It's a problem. Both of you, it's an issue I care very much about for the American people and humanitarian, financial, otherwise. Thank you so much. And up next, we've got some breaking news on the conservative attack to Berkeley, plus AOC's dirty little secret that could land her in jail. Not so secret anymore. We're going to take you behind the scenes of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Also, I was there. Stay there. In the case of the conservative assaulted on the campus of UC Berkeley, today prosecutors charged the suspect with 3 felony charges, one of assault likely to produce bodily injury, 1 battery with serious bodily injury, and 1 charge making a criminal threat. Last month, 28-year-old Zachary Greenberg was caught on camera punching the victim, Hayden Williams, during a recruiting event on the California campus. And last Friday, 10 days after the attack, police identified and arrested the suspect. Williams and his attorney joined me exclusively right after that arrest.
I remain disappointed with UC Berkeley and the fact that they allowed such a culture of intolerance and violence toward conservative viewpoints to grow at Berkeley and even thrive, really.
Williams says he's considering filing a civil suit. And of course, you remember at CPAC on Saturday, he stood next to the president and was just huge, thunderous applause. We're going to continue to follow this story, bring you updates as we get them. Also tonight, could the Democrats' shining new star be seeing some, well, shiny new prison bars? Congresswoman AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and her chief of staff are accused of illegally funneling nearly $1 million in campaign contributions in an effort to skate around campaign finance laws. The complaint claims that AOC's chief of staff took the money from the PACs that he established and moved it into these private entities, LLCs, that he controlled and AOC was on the board of. Now, these are entities that could donate to political candidates and a lot looser on the regulations, and of course to candidates like AOC herself, for example. So what happened to the money, and what did the candidate know about it? Fox News caught up with her exclusively today.
Do you have any comment on the FEC violation filed against your office?
There is no violation, so there's no violation.
Do you think that's a sign of you taking dark money?
Oh, no. I'm 100% with that. Thank you.
Joining me now is Brad Smith, a former FEC commissioner. Brad, first of all, it's nice to see the tables turned on some of these Democrats who are on their high horses all the time, claiming to have the moral superiority over everybody else. And suddenly, when they're on the defensive, they're like, no, let's get up that escalator as soon as possible. And Brad, you say that Ocasio-Cortez could actually see jail time in this case? How serious are these violations or even accusations?
Sure. Well, let's be cautious about that, Laura. I mean, I've looked at this. I've been doing this for 25 years. As an academic studying it, as a commissioner on the FEC, as a lawyer advising clients. I've never seen this kind of setup. Knowing in willful violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act can result in prison time. But let's not be like the Democrats are. It's like, now we got Trump. Now he's going to jail. My guess is AOC is not going to go to prison for this. But I do think there are very serious violations. I can't think of a way you get out of violations. There might be one. And it also shows, as you point out, the rank hypocrisy here. I mean, AOC's out there promoting this H.R. 1 bill the Democrats have that would put all kinds of more restrictions on ordinary Americans, grassroots groups, every little nonprofit, and every little trade association if they want to participate in politics. But she's out, and she's got this chief of staff, Chakrabarti, who are doing things that seem to be, like I say, I can't think of a way to get out of a violation on this.
You're being cautious, but I'm gonna say, well, look at what they did to Dinesh D'Souza. Mm-hmm. Look at what they did in that case. Okay, they threw the book at him in federal district court in New York, in Manhattan. Yeah, well, because of money that was donated to a senatorial campaign of a friend of his, and it was like his wife and I can't remember, but it was like some de minimis amount of money. It was very little. In this case, and I want people to understand this is not wonky. This is very easy to understand. There were 2 political action committees, correct? Started by this wonderkind chief of staff of hers, and that money ended up being funneled into a LLC that could donate money directly to AOC herself, correct?
Well, the LLC actually cannot donate money directly.
Oh, it's the other way around. The LLC goes to the PACs. The PACs can donate to her, correct?
But the PAC was funneling money to the LLC, and that's the question. What was the LLC doing with it? If they were supporting her campaign, they've got a major problem. And that LLC, or that PAC took in over $2 million and paid out over $1 million to this LLC. But there's no counting for what it did with over $2 million. It made $62,000 in contributions to candidates, nothing in independent expenditures. What did it do with all this money? Either it seemed to disappear into the pockets of Chakrabarti, or they used it to assist campaigns without reporting it, which would be major.
Yeah, I want to again. This gets really confusing for most people. They were doing something they weren't supposed to do, and a lot of money was involved. And it looks like the money was going to support her campaign. And if she was in control of that and knew what was going on, she could be in big trouble. That's the law.
That's the straightforward way to put it. And her best defense is probably that she was too ignorant and she didn't know what was going on.
Well, she's so ignorant. She knows how to reorient the entire U.S. economy under the Green New Deal. I want to play, this is from her chief of staff and the way he modeled this operation, this fundraising operation.
Our idea really is to run this single unified presidential style campaign that's going to look a lot like the Bernie Sanders campaign and use that model of, a single website for fundraising, a single, like a giant national movement of volunteers contacting millions of voters.
Oh, how convenient. Brad, thank you so much. And coming up, it's Fat Tuesdays. You know what that means. Ingraham and Arroyo do Mardi Gras. You're not going to believe this. Yes, coming up. Stay there.
We're going to be throwing Doritos from the
street. Live right now, Fat Tuesday. Lent begins in about an hour and 10 minutes. What are you giving up? Our own Raymond Arroyo, a New Orleans native, twisted my arm that I go down to the Big Easy ride, and my first Mardi Gras parade, who could pass that up? It was an adventure, and we wanted to bring you all along on this Mardi Gras day. So check it out.
Happy Mardi Gras!
Began in 1699 here when Jean-Baptiste Bienville landed about 60 miles south of New Orleans, and they celebrated the first Mardi Gras here. Now it gained steam in Mobile, Alabama, but then very quickly, once New Orleans was founded in 1718, this became the epicenter of Mardi Gras. As time went on, these Mardi Gras crews got bigger and bigger. And remember, this is not just any festival. This is our pre-Lenten preparation.
Yeah, 40 days of deprivation.
That's right.
Total deprivation.
Because remember, in the old Catholic rites, you couldn't have eat, you couldn't drink during the 40 days of Lent. So you had a blowout from the Epiphany on January 6th till Ash Wednesday. That's what this is, Mardi Gras.
This is the thing. I'm from Connecticut. Like we have like a Memorial Day parade where like the Girl Scouts march, the veterans.
In New Orleans, things are a little different. You have everybody who parades in a crew has to wear a costume, and you must wear a mask. It is actually against the law to not mask even when you're Laura Ann.
Oh, okay.
All right, put them on. Here we go.
No one will throw anything at me.
All right, we're rolling.
All right, let's do it.
Part of every crew, when you come in, before you load on the floats, you have to make sure that all of your throws are ready.
Happy Mardi Gras! Is this unbelievable? Look at this crowd, Laura. Unbelievable.
We made the faces, the smiles of the people on the street. That made it.
There's nothing like it.
It was fantastic. Everybody have a happy Mardi Gras.
Bye.
Okay, well, Raymond said we shouldn't throw all the good beads early because we'd run out. We get to the convention center where all the people are. We had like 4 bags of beads left over, and we just had to leave them behind. It was ridiculous. It was so much fun. My favorite is throwing the footballs, I've got to say. There's more where that came from when we come back with the last bite, and I brought back some of the beads.